Zelri wiped the sweat off her brow, hoping it would stall the constant dripping into her eyes. Today was most likely the hottest day of the year, even for an orc in the scarred Badlands. Yet, she persisted in the scorching sun, watching as the lesser tribekin wandered about their business. Jobs needed to be done in Halhuidor, the canyon city. She looked down from near the top of the massive crevice dividing Mount Halhu and Mount Kador, still surprised to this day on how stubborn her ancestors must have been to settle here, clinging amidst the sheer cliffs as a river cascaded along most of the canyon floor. Who would have guessed that only a few decades later they would discover a way to harness the energy of the river through water wheels and clever mechanical tricks? It was made even better when they discovered a tranquil spring at the origin of said river. Bountiful was the harvest of unique plant life each year from the sacred spring, a source of rejuvenation for the tribe's most prestigious members. But not me, Zelri thought. She tapped her chipped tusks bitterly. Too tainted. What a joke. Her descent into loathing was interrupted when the door to the chief's hut opened up. Gragtuck, her dear, hot-headed father, stormed out with less of a scowl on his face than usual. The massive green-skinned warrior patted the dyed leather pauldrons on his shoulders. "Fine work, my son. It eases my mind knowing that home will be under good care while I'm away." Taking hold of a cord attached to a secure apparatus, he pointed a long nail at his grim, robed daughter. "Don't do anything stupid, dangerous, or any combination of the two, or I'll dig your grave myself." "Have a pleasant time, father." Zelri waved as the chieftain attached the cord to his belt, and leapt off the platform, descending in a way as to not break his legs upon landing. Wanting to waste no more time, Zelri pried open the door. "Sister?" Duelrang half-heartedly waved up from the scroll he was reading. "Have a nice talk with father?" "Wasn't more of a talk so much as the usual death threat." "Which is what I'm assuming you're going to do to me." He rolled up the scroll, depositing it into the satchel at his side, of which he wore an abundance of. While neither he or his sister were the biggest or strongest of orcs, they were both well learned. Which wasn't to say either of them couldn't tear the limbs off the occasional interloper causing headaches for their father. "What do you want?" Zelri retrieved a book from her bag, slamming it on the central table, toppling various wood carvings of buildings and orcs. They must have been going over the state of Halhuidor, she thought. Without me, as usual. "I think you know why I'm here," she said. Duelrang took one glance at the book before answering. "No." "Oh, don't play dumb," Zelri sneered. "I'm not playing. I know exactly why you're here, and the answer is no." "This is the prime opportunity. While father's away—" "The chief," Duelrang interjected. Zelri scoffed. "While he's away, this is the chance I've been waiting for, to prove myself." Duelrang shifted his focus between his sister and the yellow-paged book, bound with rusted iron. "I still don't know what's in that thing, only that Gragtuck should have taken it away from you." Zelri nearly laughed. "He can barely remember me sometimes, much less that I have a book that he would want gone." She opened the grimoire with a thud, flipping through pages like mad. "All I need are a few ingredients deemed forbidden." She made quotations in the air. "Really, it's ridiculous that some of them are unobtainable for me." "It's necessary to stop you from doing something that could put a whole people at risk." Duelrang paced around the small room while his sister continued skimming the book. "Do you even remember?" "Heard it before, blah, blah, blah. Look at this." She pushed the book across the table. Duelrang peered at the twin pages depicting what appeared to be a humanoid figure draped in lightning. "Can you guess what this is?" Duelrang shook his head. "Destruction brought down upon us?" "Not us. Jabulner." Her brother groaned at the mention of their rival clan currently trying to set up a forward camp not 3 miles away from Halhuidor's entrance. The two tribes of orcs have long been in a state of constant war after Jabulner found out about the spring hidden deep within the mountains. At first, they attempted a joining of clans. But their greed was obvious, and Halhuidor's ancestors declined the merging, branding Jabulner as power-hungry fiends, which resulted in backlash, followed by raids. Now, here Zelri was, trying to do everyone a favor and end the conflict, but no one would give her a chance. Tradition continued to be the bane of progress. Her brother pinched his nose, his tusks nearly twitched with irritation. Zell, we've told you to leave it alone. It's a more delicate matter than you can handle. Delicate? She shouted. You call them trying to poison our spring delicate? What about the constant harassment of our hunters? The raids? All the skirmishes right outside our home? She slammed the table, spilling carvings everywhere. Where's the delicate part I'm missing? We can't solve this your way. Just like you tried to help the spring along during a dry season. All you managed to do was flood the lower tiers. Or like when you attempted to fatten up our growls. What happened then? Zellery vaguely remembered the large horned animals that were looking a bit skinny last year, and how much better they looked when she sprinkled some growth magic in their feed. All I recall is them growing big and healthy after my intervention. They grew nearly twice their size, and thrice as aggressive. Duelring pushed the book back across the table, carving a few new notches in the wood. Nearly killed all our herders. Fed our home for twice as long as they would have. Heck, maybe even 3 times. That's not the point. Then what is? Duelring let his mouth hang open. Words seemed to form in his head, but none came out. Just tell me what the spell is, he began slowly, and we'll work from there. Zellery smiled. She knew this was a tactic her brother often employed. Start small, make her hope, then cut her ideas down before they grew too big. At least now he was listening. After performing a swift ritual, the invoker can harness the power of their bloodline, enhancing their ties to it and gaining strength. How much strength? I'm not sure, Zellery admitted. The information isn't that precise. It is a delicate practice, after all. One that would be more fleshed out if I were given something to work with. You're not getting a laboratory, Duelring muttered under his breath. But go on. What do you need to pull off this invocation? I already have most of the things I need, actually. Zellery rummaged around in her bag before procuring 2 items. The first of which was a vial of some viscous purple liquid, and the second appeared to be a piece of an animal horn. Placing both on the table, she waved off her hand. Everything else the spell needs is trifling. Duelring ignored the vial. Instead, he picked up the horn, examining it with a scrutinous glare. A Kraktouli horn. Alpha, if the markings are to infer. Zellery grinned. Bartered it off the last hunters we sent out. Luckily, they all made it back alive. Duelring then glanced down at the vial, giving his sister a quizzical look. Crag viper venom, she said. Weak poison, but fast acting. It's going to be used in conjunction with the horn to apply the spell quickly and efficiently. Painless? Duelring asked. Who said anything about painless? Duelring rolled his eyes, tossing the horn back to his sister. If you already have everything you need, then why haven't you performed the spell yet? Usually you never come to me or father for permission anyway. Yeah. Zellery packed up the reagents. So here's the fine detail. The spell requires something to give it range, so to speak. An ingredient that can connect blood to blood, without having to corral every blood relative of the host in the same place. Like a rope? Think in a more ethereal sense, brother. Zellery paced around the table, replacing pieces on the board as she did. Metaphysically, metaphorically, magically. I get it. What do you need? Just a ripe piece of fathom fruit. Duelring's chest flared, eyes narrowed. No. One piece is all... No! This time Duelring hit the table, scattering the pieces once more. You're always like this, asking for too much and getting too little in return. It's a damn fruit, brother! From what I've heard, it doesn't even taste good. Never got to try it. Zellery mumbled the last part under her breath. Fathom fruit, as far as her knowledge went, only grew in the ocean depths, which was far, far away from where Halhudor was located. Rumors had it the elves developed a technique to cultivate them in facilities, but at reduced yield and rate. The fact that this spring in the middle of the desert produced such a delicacy was astounding, and part of why others wanted the spring so badly. While tasting like scrumptious rubbery salt water, the fruit had an intense amplifying effect on the consumer's senses, both physically and otherworldly. Some of the more thematic orcs that participated in the rare ceremony of eating fathom fruit have described an innate connection to the 5 virtues, with ferocity being the more favorable of the 5, seeing how he was the one to shape life out of dirt, sand, and mud, bringing orcs to life. It was this prospect that Zelry thought would be the perfect catalyst to top off the spell. All I need, she ran her hand along the table, feeling the grain of the wood contort, is one little piece. And none you shall have, Duelring sneered. It's sacred. It's baffling, Zelry shouted. One piece of soggy produce that only gives old rotted guts their visions for the destruction of the enemies at our doorstep. Tell me how that is not a fair trade. Get out! Duelring swatted a hand at her. Leave and never speak about this ludicrous magic again. I expected this from father, but you? Think about it, only one? As order of acting chief. Duelring stared her down. Cease this nonsense. Zelry straightened her back. Grabbing the book, she stuffed it away in her bags and turned to leave the hut. I would have thought you wiser than he, Duelring. She left before her brother got the chance to tell her off once more. Well, Zelry thought while attaching herself to the apparatus hanging off the cliffside. Looks like I'll have to find a suitable replacement for the fathom fruit. The only other thing I can think of that comes to mind would be the blood from a coil worm, or the liquefied remains of a lithic elder. So I might as well give up while I have the chance. On her way down, she took a look at her surroundings. Something Zelry didn't typically do, what with her time better spent on research. But taking some time away from a problem could certainly do no harm. Seeing all the orcs meander their way along the rope bridges, well-structured wooden platforms and elevator devices, watching families splash around in barred-off areas of the river below, reckless youngsters ziplining across gaps without harnessing themselves in properly, it reminded Zelry that there was more to this than development in the magical arts. There were orcs that lived here, happy orcs, and now they were under the threat of another clan that would stop at nothing to have what they rightfully earned. This is bigger than me and my ambitions, she thought. Disconnecting herself off at a lower level than she intended, Zelry sifted around in her reagent bag to make sure she had the right materials for her new plan. If neither of them will see things my way, then I'll just have to improvise. Torchlight flickered from the sheer cliffs of Halhudor as night fell. Orc families were currently in bed, feasting on hearty meals, or causing a ruckus drinking more than their fill. Zelry was doing none of those things. Instead, she was spending her evening desperately clinging to the base of Mount Kador, hoping to avoid tragic death by river pummeling. She inhaled sharply as one of her feet slid ever so slightly on the smooth pathway beneath her. Well, pathway was a relative term. In reality, it was just a few inches of semi-flattened rock that resembled what could be called a path. The tribe's ancestors didn't want easy access to the spring, so they made it possible to reach only by a boat which was connected to a metal line that ran along the river bottom. The secret route Zelry was currently taking was a closely guarded secret of the chieftain's bloodline, yet she herself was excluded from such knowledge. The only reason she knew about the trail was due to her natural exploratory nature, yet this was the first time she ever attempted something so dangerous. While she had to admit it was invigorating, it would be nice to not be in constant danger. All it would take was a single error, and her body would be torn apart by the rapids, her corpse washing up at Halhudor's gates. Couldn't just let me ride the boat, she mumbled to herself, remaining vigilant in her balancing act. Single piece of fruit. So much as a sliver. Arrogant fools. Her rambling trailed off as she approached a small bend in the rock face. Water cascaded around the corner, crashing into the mountainside some 100 feet across from where she was. Over many years, the river had started to make a dent in the steadfast stone. While the river close to her side was more calm, Zelry had no doubt it would be an equally swift death. This is easy, she said, peeking her head around the smoothed corner. Just one foot after another. Hoping there was some form of leverage to help herself swing to the side, she found no such salvation, at least not in arm's reach. She would have to let go and keep balance across the palm's width ledge. As luck would have it, the surface beneath her feet was dry due to the natural curve of the river's path. Zelri closed her eyes, took a few deep breaths, and let go of the now familiar mountainside. She stayed steady, albeit a bit wobbly from the anxiety. If only Father could see the length I go to keep the tribe thriving, she thought. And while she didn't do this very often out of the kindness of her heart, it would be nice to get a thank you every once in a while. One shuffling step at a time, Zelri slid across the ledge, inching toward the bend. Her feet ached. Her breathing was uneven and forced. Keep calm, stay calm, she kept reciting in her mind, but her body didn't listen, threatening to freak out. Why can't I control my body as well as my mind? She made a mental note to find a way to remedy that issue. Keeping a solid, rickety pace, Zelri rounded the bend in a single, perilous action, which was also the precise moment that the river surged against the opposite side, releasing a boom as the current crashed against the bend, splashing water into the air. Zelri tensed as her head rang from the crashing wave. Cold droplets splashed against her. A second of aftershock later, she attempted to hug the smooth rock, finding no leverage. Her feet slipped clean off the narrow path. She fell a few feet, her left shin scraping against the ledge's corner. Stifling her cries, she was more concerned about not falling to her death in the abnormally clean riverbed below. Managing to grab onto the ledge as she fell, her demise was brought to a halt, only for the cost of her arms feeling like they were about to be torn off. Zelri tried to get a foothold using her good leg, but only found yet another smooth surface. Attempting to pull herself up proved futile as well. Out of habit, one of her hands let go of the ledge to begin shuffling around in her bag full of reagents, leaving Zelri dangling by a single arm. Not too quickly, she thought. Wouldn't want to drop anything. With adrenaline-filled precision, she retrieved a small jar containing 3 insects. All of them were approximately the size of her fingernail. Shaped similarly to a spider missing 2 of its legs, these rock and crystal-coated mites were typically referred to as dirt motes. The rustling of the jar woke them up. As they peered out with 6 eyes each, they watched on in terrified curiosity, while Zelri muttered something. Magic was a fickle, imprecise thing. Everybody had it, but only those willing to look inwards and seize it for themselves could wield it in true fashion. At its core, magic could be shaped and conjured into many things, if the caster had proper vision of the end goal. Anything could help, whether it be words or writing, wands or staves, or, in some particular cases, finding clever releases through ingredients. After muttering her spell, Zelri smashed the jar against the rock wall, destroying the jar and its poor inhabitants. Loose earth sprayed everywhere, emitting from the jar's impact. Trying her best to focus, Zelri used her free hand to guide the dirt parallel with the mountain, spanning directly below her from the ledge. Rough scratching noises filled the air until the dirt stopped moving. Where the cloud once traveled was now a solid pathway. Zelri let go of the ledge, finally giving her arms a break. But she couldn't linger. From her practice, she could only get the earthen road to last about a minute, as she didn't want to be standing on it when it disappeared. Gritting her teeth, she shambled along, regaining her grip on the wall and path as she watched her spell begin to crumble. Once she was a few steps in her rhythm, the dirt path she made was gone. I was hoping to save those little guys for a better time, but I guess saving my own life counts. Zelri pushed ahead through the pain searing up her left leg. As fortune would have it, she would not have to endure the suffering for long. A slight incline in the trail and a short climb later led up to the spring, where the water was currently gushing forth in force down between the mountains. Only 3 trees dotted the otherwise flat clearing within the unworked stone walls. Attempts to cultivate more trees proved unfruitful, though these provided enough shade for the elders as they relaxed in the shallow depths of the spring. Hardly any moonlight shone down here, yet the spring was softly lit by the wondrous plant life that flourished in its crystal pools. Bioluminescent flowers that grew underwater sprouted forth from vines clinging to the spring's bottom. Candescent blues mixed with gentle ivories to give the place a calming atmosphere. Chief Gragtuck, as well as many previous chieftains, preferred to hold more important meetings with rather rash orcs here. While it would be nice to stick around for a bath, Zelri was only focused on one plant near the tree, with 2 obstacles in her path. She didn't know specifically who the orcish guards were, nor did she really care. All that mattered was that they were leaning against the trees she needed to get to. As luck would have it, there was a ring of fruit-bearing shrubs planted along the perimeter of the spring. The only downside was that her feet were submerged in water. She would have to be careful. But as long as she was behind the bushes where few of the luminous plants grew, Zelri would be fine. Sneaking along through the water, she only moved when the guards would talk to each other. Hopefully they were more invested in their conversation and sharpening their spears than they were guarding a sacred spring. Everything went smoothly. Proper pacing made her as stealthy as a snake slithering through sand. Zelri was close enough to see her prize, a fist-sized fruit that shone purple streaks in the dim light. There were a few of them attached to a vine running over the tree's drowned roots. Most of them appeared small through the rippling surface, not quite ripe, but the one closest to her and the two guards was practically begging to be plucked from its aquatic prison. Once she got close enough to the guards that she could reach out and touch them, Zelri retrieved a vial filled with dark, churning gas. She would have to be quiet for this spell, so she took her time to think about her actions, how the image would form, where it would go. In her mind, she could see the magic in its entirety take place before anything happened. Uncorking the bottle, she breathed in the gas. Holding back the urge to cough, Zelri breathed it out in a stream to her right. There was far more gas that came out than what was in the bottle. She was worried that she might pass out as the thread of dark mist soared around the outside of the tree and across the spring. Across from where she stood emerged a striking semblance of her own form cloaked in shadows, features distorted and fading. "Hey!" The guards perked up, brandishing their spears at the intruder. "How'd you get here? Who are you?" The image of Zelri said nothing. Instead, it ran toward the river. If either of the orcs were perceptive enough, they would have noticed that it made no sound as it ran. No ripples in the pools were made from its steps. But it seemed like they were too thick-headed to notice as they waded through the water to try and catch the inky visage. In a swift movement, Zelri retrieved a knife from her side, leaned out from the bush, and severed the fathom fruit from its stem. "Got it!" She mentally triumphed as she sheathed her blade. But the skin of the fruit was more slick than it seemed. It slipped from her grasp, plunging into the spring with a splash. Not incredibly loud, but enough to catch the ears of one of the guards. "Who's there?" The one with a thick beard started sneaking up to Zelri's hiding spot. "Show yourself. You might not get hurt." Zelri mentally cursed herself. Opening her bag, she gripped the fruit with 2 hands and shoved it inside while also retrieving a spool of silver thread. Risking herself more, Zelri whispered the spell quickly, undoing the thread and suspending it in mid-air between her and the guard at even intervals. "Come on out, there's nowhere to run," the guard commanded. But as he shoved the top of the shrub aside to find the interloper, he saw nothing. Zelri held her breath, hoping her spell would hold up. A little trick she developed with spider silk. As long as she didn't move and remained in dim light, she should be practically invisible behind her woven web. And invisible she was. After a couple seconds pondering where the intruder went, the guard shook his head and turned around. "Hey, Toady, you find anything?" "Nope. Must have hopped in the river or something." "Maybe the spring's playing tricks on us again." The first guard went back to lean against the tree. "These long shifts are getting to us." They continued their chat, completely unaware of the sorceress making her way back to the path. "Why have I never done this before if it was that easy?" Zelri pondered as she sifted through her bag. Pulling out a shard of aquamarine, she prepared one last spell for the night. Though not as potent as sapphire in this situation, the aquamarine would serve its purpose. Speaking in a low tone, Zelri tossed the gem sliver into the rapids. Once submerged completely, it silently exploded in a flash of white powder. Before her stood a platform of ice in the middle of the desert, a platform that would quickly begin to move away with the current. Stepping onto it, she almost lost balance as it shifted, but it remained afloat. Once it sailed close enough to one of the village's platforms, she would jump off it and the ice would melt rather quickly in the morning heat. Then the real preparations could begin. My way is the best way, Zelri thought. They'll see that soon enough.